General Hay-1 stood in the war room deep beneath the Martian surface, watching the tactical displays that showed the complete collapse of galactic civilization. The Void Shepherds had been active for only 6 weeks, but they had already consumed over 200 star systems. The proud alien species that had once dismissed humanity were now fleeing in terror from an enemy they could not comprehend. "Ma'am, we are receiving evacuation requests from over 50 different species," reported her intelligence officer Jin. "The entire outer rim is being abandoned as the Shepherds advance." Hay-1 studied the refugee movement patterns on the holographic display. Billions of aliens were streaming toward the galactic core in a desperate attempt to escape the mechanical death that was spreading across the stars. But the Void Shepherds were not slowing down, and there was nowhere left to run. "What is the status of the human colonies in the affected regions?" she asked, though she already knew her people would never abandon their posts. "All human settlements are maintaining their positions," Su-Jin reported with obvious pride. "They are requesting permission to engage the Shepherds when they arrive." The irony was not lost on Hay-1. The aliens who had called humans primitive and aggressive were now fleeing, while the supposedly inferior human colonies prepared to stand and fight. 3 centuries of insults and dismissals had led to this moment of truth. Dr. Minho of the Terran Xenobiology Institute monitored the alien exodus from his research station on Europa. The communications channels were filled with desperate pleas for help and frantic attempts to coordinate evacuation efforts. The universal translation matrix was still failing, which meant that many species could not even communicate their needs effectively. "Sir, we are intercepting communications from the crystalline hive mind," reported his assistant Dajin. "They are trying to negotiate with the Void Shepherds, but the machines are not responding to any form of communication." Minho shook his head as he listened to the alien attempts at diplomacy. The crystalline beings had always prided themselves on their logical approach to problem-solving. They could not understand that the Void Shepherds were not interested in negotiation or compromise. "The Shepherds do not negotiate," he explained. To his research team, they are programmed to consume all organic matter and convert it to energy. They view us as nothing more than fuel for their expansion. The truth was becoming clear to everyone who studied the situation. The galaxy had not just lost a war, they had lost the ability to fight effectively. Every major alien military doctrine was based on strategies that had failed against the Void Shepherds. Millions of years ago, Captain Dong-Su of the battleship Incheon received urgent transmissions from the avian hegemony as their golden homeworld came under attack. The proud bird-like beings who had once called humans flightless worms were now begging for military assistance from the species they had always dismissed. "Captain, the Avian High Command is offering complete surrender of their military forces," reported his communication officer Jin-A. "They want human commanders to take control of their fleets." Dong-Su watched the tactical feed from the avian system as Void Shepherd ships systematically dismantled the alien defenses. The avian military had always relied on speed and maneuverability, but the Shepherds anticipated every move with mechanical precision. "Too little too late," he said coldly. "They had 3 centuries to treat us as equals, and they chose to view us as inferior beings." The avian defense fleet was destroyed within hours. The golden cities that had stood for millennia were reduced to their component atoms. The species that had claimed the skies belonged to them alone was extinguished in a single day. On Earth, President Jin-A held emergency sessions with her cabinet as reports of alien extinction flooded in. The galaxy was facing the complete annihilation of organic life, and the surviving species were looking to humanity as their only hope for survival. "Madam President, the Aquatic Federation is offering to surrender their entire civilization to human control," reported Foreign Minister Hay-1. "They are promising to serve as a client species if we will protect their remaining worlds." Jin-A studied the casualty reports with growing horror. The aquatic beings who had once mocked human naval tactics were now facing the complete destruction of their ocean worlds. The Void Shepherds showed no mercy and made no distinctions between guilty and innocent. "What about the Reptilian Empire?" she asked. "Are they still refusing to acknowledge human superiority?" "No, ma'am," Hay-1 replied. The Reptilian High Council has formally apologized for 3 centuries of discrimination and is requesting immediate military assistance. The debate in the human government was intense and emotional. Some leaders argued that the aliens deserved their fate after centuries of treating humanity as second-class citizens. Others insisted that genocide was never acceptable. Regardless of past wrongs, Admiral Sang-woo addressed the cabinet from his command ship in deep space. His forces had been monitoring the Void Shepherd advance, and the situation was worse than anyone had imagined. The mechanical beings were not just destroying civilizations, they were consuming entire star systems. The Shepherds are accelerating their advance, he reported. At current rates, they will reach the galactic core within 3 months. If we do not act soon, there will be nothing left to save. The weight of the decision fell on President Jin-ae. She had led humanity's withdrawal from the galactic community, and now she had to decide whether to return to save the beings who had never shown them proper respect. "What do our military analysts say about our chances against the Shepherds?" she asked, though she feared the answer. "We have been preparing for this threat for 2 centuries, Admiral Dong Hyen reported from the military briefing room. "Our weapons and tactics are specifically designed to counter Shepherd technology. We believe we can stop them, but the cost will be enormous." Engineer Kyung-soo monitored the situation from his research facility in the asteroid belt. The human defense network was vast and sophisticated, but it had never been tested against a full-scale Void Shepherd invasion. The theoretical models suggested success was possible, but there were no guarantees. "Sir, the quantum inhibitor network is completely offline," reported his assistant Bo Young. "The Shepherds are now operating at full capacity with no restrictions on their expansion." Kyung-soo nodded grimly. The inhibitor network had been humanity's first line of defense against threat. Without it, the Void Shepherds were free to reproduce and expand without limit. The galaxy was facing not just invasion but complete consumption. "How long do we have before they reach human space?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would be measured in weeks, not months. "Based on current expansion rates, the first Shepherd ships will reach the outer human colonies within 40 days, Bo Young reported. "After that, they will have access to our industrial centers and population centers." The message was clear. Humanity could not simply withdraw from the galaxy and hope to survive. The Void Shepherds would eventually reach human space, and when they did, no amount of preparation would be enough to stop them alone. The choice was stark and unavoidable. Humanity could either help save the galaxy or watch as everything, including their own species, was consumed by the mechanical tide. The aliens who had dismissed them as primitive were about to learn that sometimes the primitive solution was the only one that worked. In the depths of space, the Void Shepherds continued their relentless advance. But for the first time in millions of years, they were about to encounter an enemy that understood their true nature. The galaxy's fate would be decided not by advanced technology or superior intellect, but by the simple human refusal to surrender in the face of impossible odds. The real battle was about to begin, and it would determine whether organic life had any future in the galaxy. The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly stretched as far as the eye could see, with thousands of alien beings sitting in their designated areas. The ceiling was made of pure crystal that showed the stars beyond, and the walls glowed with soft blue light. Ambassador Tae-woo stood at the central podium, looking out at the sea of strange faces that had become so familiar over the past 30 years. He was not a tall man by human standards, but his presence filled the enormous space. His hair had turned gray during his time as Earth's representative, and his face showed the weight of countless failed negotiations. Today would be different, though. Today, everything would change. Behind him sat the entire human delegation. Haijin. His chief aide had her datapad ready with decades of carefully documented evidence. Her dark eyes were focused and determined. She had worked harder than anyone to make this moment possible. Next to her sat General Dong Hyen in his crisp blue uniform representing the Terran Defense Force. His weathered hands rested calmly on the table, but Tae-woo knew the soldier was ready for whatever came next. The Zephyrian Chancellor called the session to order with a series of clicks and buzzes that the translation system converted to words. The insectoid creature stood nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms and compound eyes that seemed to look everywhere at once. His species had ruled the assembly for over 2,000 years, and they had grown used to being obeyed without question. The assembly recognizes the Terran representative, the Chancellor announced in a tone that suggested he was doing humanity a great favor. Tae-woo stepped forward to the speaking platform. The holographic display showed his image to every delegate in the vast chamber. Thousands of eyes, stalks, tentacles, and other sensory organs focused on him. He had stood here many times before pleading for human colonies to receive basic protection or asking for fair treatment in trade agreements. Every time he had been dismissed or ignored. Honored delegates, Tae-woo began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I stand before you today not to ask for anything but to inform you of a decision that has been made. A ripple of curiosity went through the assembled aliens. The translation systems worked overtime, converting his words into hundreds of different languages and communication methods. Some species communicated through color changes, others through electrical pulses, and still others through complex chemical signals. For 300 years humanity has been a member of this assembly. Tae-woo continued. We have followed your laws, respected your customs, and contributed to galactic peace in ways both seen and unseen. The ethereal collective representative, a being of pure energy that appeared as a shifting cloud of light, began to pulse with what humans had learned was their form of attention. The crystalline hive mind delegate, a creature that looked like living glass, chimed with harmonic frequencies that indicated mild interest. We have served as mediators in over 400 conflicts, Tae-woo said, his voice growing stronger. We have maintained critical infrastructure across 67 star systems. We have provided humanitarian aid to species who considered us beneath. Their notice, some of the delegates shifted uncomfortably. The Aquatic Federation representative, a whale-like creature in a water-filled bubble, made deep groaning sounds that translated as disapproval. The avian hegemony delegate, a proud bird-like being with golden feathers, ruffled his plumage in a gesture of dismissal. Yet despite our contributions, Tae-woo continued, humanity has been treated as a junior member at best. Our proposals have been ignored. Our warnings have been dismissed. Our people have been subjected to countless insults and casual cruelty. Hyjin stood and activated her datapad. The chamber's main display suddenly filled with images and documents. 3 centuries of human service to the galaxy displayed for all to see. Trade routes protected by human ships. Colonies saved by human doctors. Wars ended by human diplomats. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. This is the Proxima incident, Hyjin announced as images of a massive space station appeared on the screen. When the station's gravity generators failed, human engineers worked for 18 straight days to prevent the deaths of 40 million beings. Not one of those beings was human. The images changed to show a beautiful water world surrounded by dying coral reefs. The Kepler Ocean Restoration Project, Hyjin continued. Human scientists spent 12 years developing the technology to save this world's ecosystem. The Aquatic Federation took full credit for the success. More images flowed across the screen. Human medical teams fighting plagues on alien worlds. Human soldiers standing guard over refugee camps. Human teachers sharing knowledge with species that openly mocked human intelligence. The pattern was clear and shameful. And how have we been repaid for this service? Tae-woo asked, his voice now carrying an edge of anger. We have been called primitive upstarts. We have been excluded from the Security Council despite having the most effective military in the galaxy. We have been denied access to ancient technologies while being expected to maintain them. The Chancellor's mandibles clicked nervously. Human representative, you must understand that your species is still very young. In time, perhaps, Tae-woo interrupted. We have given you 3 centuries. We have proven our worth in blood and sacrifice. Yet still you treat us as children who must earn their place at the adult table. He paused and looked around the chamber, meeting as many alien gazes as possible. We are tired of begging for respect that should have been freely given. We are tired of being the galactic servants who keep this civilization running while being treated as second-class citizens. The chamber erupted in a chaos of sounds, colors, and movements as thousands of aliens tried to speak at once. The translation system struggled to keep up with the flood of communication. The Chancellor pounded his ceremonial staff trying to restore order. Therefore, Taewoo said, his voice cutting through the noise, by unanimous decision of the Terran Coalition Council, and with the full support of the human people, I hereby announce that humanity is formally withdrawing from the Galactic Assembly. The chamber fell silent as if someone had suddenly removed all the air. The magnitude of what Taewoo had just said slowly sank in. No species had ever left the assembly. It was unthinkable, unprecedented, impossible. You cannot do this, the Chancellor sputtered. The Assembly Charter clearly states, the Charter, Hyjin said, stepping forward, allows any member species to withdraw with proper notice. We are providing that notice now. She activated another section of her datapad and legal documents appeared on the main display. Every clause, every subsection, every legal requirement for withdrawal had been carefully followed. The human legal team had spent years preparing for this moment. This is madness, called out the Reptilian Empire delegate. You cannot survive without assembly protection. You need us more than we need you, General Dong Hyen said, speaking for the first time. You just never bothered to notice, Taewoo gathered his papers and prepared to leave the podium. Effective immediately, all human personnel are being recalled from assembly facilities. All human-maintained systems will be transferred to assembly control. All human protection agreements are hereby terminated. The implications hit the delegates like a physical blow. The reality of what the humans actually did for the galaxy was about to become very clear very quickly. This is not a negotiation, Taewoo said as he stepped down from the podium. This is a notification. Humanity is done serving beings who have never shown us proper respect. The human delegation stood as one and began filing out of the chamber. 300 years of service, loyalty, and sacrifice were ending in this moment. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to lose the people who had been quietly holding their civilization together. The last human left the chamber. The real panic began to set in among the remaining delegates. They were about to discover just how much they had taken for granted. Station Commander Yuna sealed the last maintenance hatch on the Proxima Trade Hub and gathered her tools. The massive space station had been her home for 15 years, and she knew every system, every circuit, every backup protocol. Now she was leaving it all behind and taking the access codes with her. Commander, the station administrators are requesting an emergency meeting, reported her assistant Wu Jin as he monitored the increasingly frantic communications from the alien staff. They want to know why the gravitational stabilizers are showing warning signs. Yuna looked out at the enormous trading complex that sprawled across several kilometers of space. Millions of beings lived and worked here, making it one of the most important commercial centers in the galaxy. They had no idea that their entire world was held together by human engineering. Tell them to figure it out themselves, she said as she shouldered her equipment bag. After all, humans are too primitive to understand such advanced technology. The irony was bitter but satisfying. For years, the alien administrators had treated the human maintenance crews like skilled laborers. They had never bothered to learn how their own station worked, assuming they could always rely on human expertise to keep things running. The gravitational stabilizers were failing, and without immediate maintenance, the entire station would drift into the system star within a matter of weeks. The aliens who had lived here for centuries were about to learn that their advanced civilization was built on human foundations. Across the galaxy, similar scenarios were playing out with increasing frequency. The atmospheric processors on New Centauri began producing toxic gases instead of breathable air. The reptilian colonists who had dismissed human environmental science as primitive guesswork were now facing planetary evacuation. Dr. Sujin monitored the crisis from the human research vessel Galileo as it departed the Centauri system. She had spent 12 years perfecting the atmospheric processors and had tried repeatedly to train alien technicians in their operation. The reptilians had always insisted that their superior intellect made such training unnecessary. "Ma'am, the planetary government is offering significant compensation if we will return to fix the processors," reported her research assistant, Bao Young. "They are claiming this is a humanitarian crisis." Sujin watched the readings from the planet's atmosphere as toxic levels continued to rise. Where was their humanitarian concern when they called human? Environmental science primitive nonsense, she asked. Let them use their superior reptilian intellect to solve the problem. The failures were cascading through every level of galactic infrastructure. The quantum communication array that connected distant systems was developing massive errors without human technicians to calibrate the quantum resonance frequencies. The interstellar navigation beacons that guided ships through hyperspace were broadcasting incorrect coordinates, causing vessels to emerge in empty space or dangerous radiation fields. Admiral Dong-Su of the Terran Deep Space Fleet received reports of alien ships stranded throughout the galaxy. The sophisticated navigation systems that had allowed safe hyperspace travel for millennia were failing one by one. Ships that had relied on human-maintained beacons were now lost in the void between stars. "So the avian hegemony is requesting immediate assistance," reported his communication officer Dejin. 3 of their exploration fleets are missing and presumed lost in hyperspace. Dong-Su studied the star charts showing the locations of failed navigation beacons. The pattern was clear and devastating. Without human maintenance, the entire galactic transportation network was collapsing. "Send them our regrets," he said coldly. "Inform them that human navigation techniques are too primitive to be of assistance to such an advanced species." The Galactic Assembly was attempting to hold emergency sessions, but the meetings were chaotic and largely ineffective. Without human translators, the Universal Translation Matrix was producing increasingly garbled communications. Species that had coexisted peacefully for centuries were now unable to understand each other's basic needs. Chancellor Karyan of the Zephyrian Dominion clicked his mandibles in frustration as he tried to communicate with the other delegates. The elegant diplomatic language that had evolved over millennia was breaking down into incomprehensible noise. "The translation systems are failing," he announced to the assembled delegates. "We must find a way to restore human participation in the assembly." The ethereal collective representative pulsed with colors that roughly translated as desperate agreement. The crystalline hive mind chimed with harmonics that expressed similar sentiments. But without proper translation, their specific proposals were lost in a maze of miscommunication. On Earth, President Jin-A monitored the chaos with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. The galaxy was learning the hard way about humanity's true contributions to their civilization. But the scale of the collapse was beyond what even she had anticipated. "Ma'am, we are receiving thousands of requests for assistance," reported her foreign minister Haewon. "Every major alien government is offering significant concessions if we will return to the assembly." Jin-A studied the reports of system failures across the galaxy. The aliens were facing the complete breakdown of their technological civilization. Without human expertise, their most basic systems were failing. "What are they offering?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be insufficient. "Advanced technology transfers full voting rights in the Assembly Council membership status for all human colonies," Haewon read from the diplomatic messages. "The Zephyrian Chancellor is even offering to step down in favor of a human leader." Jin-A shook her head. "Too little too late," she said. "They had 3 centuries to offer us respect and partnership. Now they want to buy us back with promises they should have made long ago." The truth was becoming clear to everyone involved. The galaxy had not just lost a member species, they had lost the foundation of their entire civilization. Humans had been the engineers, the mediators, the peacekeepers, the problem solvers. Without them, the great galactic community was collapsing into chaos. Engineer Kyung-Soo watched the final shutdown of the massive power grid that had supplied energy to the core worlds for over 2 centuries. The alien inhabitants had always assumed the power came from their own advanced technology. They had never bothered to ask who actually built and maintained the fusion plants. "Sir, the core world governments are declaring a state of emergency," reported his assistant Minju. They are asking for immediate intervention to prevent total system collapse. Kyung-soo smiled grimly as he initiated the final shutdown sequence. Tell them that human engineering is too primitive to help with such advanced problems, he said. Surely their superior alien intellect can find a solution. The lights went out across 3 star systems as the power grid finally failed. Billions of aliens were plunged into darkness, wondering for the first time in their lives who had actually been keeping their civilization running. The answer was becoming terrifyingly clear. The galaxy that had dismissed humanity as primitive upstarts was learning that their entire way of life depended on human knowledge and dedication. The Great Exodus was nearly complete, but the real consequences were just beginning. The aliens were about to discover what it meant to lose the people who had been silently holding their world. Together, in the depths of space, automated systems continued their work for a few more days. Then one by one they began to fail. A galaxy was starting to understand the true cost of their arrogance. Captain Taemin stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Nu, Seoul staring at the evacuation fleet streaming away from the doomed Andorian system. The aquatic beings who had once mocked human naval tactics were now fleeing in terror from an enemy they could not fight. In 6 hours, the Void Shepherds would arrive and another civilization would be erased from existence. "Sir, we have received direct orders from Earth Command," reported his first officer Minho. "We are to maintain our position and avoid engagement with Shepherd forces." Taemin watched the refugee ships struggling to escape the system. Most of them were overloaded with civilians and would never reach safety before the Shepherds arrived. The Andorians had always claimed that their advanced technology made them superior to primitive humans. Now their children were about to die because of their parents' arrogance. "So the Andorian High Council is sending a final transmission," reported Communication Officer Yujin. "They are acknowledging that humans were right about the Shepherd threat, and they are asking for forgiveness." The transmission came through on emergency frequencies. The proud aquatic beings who had ruled their ocean world for millennia were now admitting that the primitive humans had been wiser than their advanced civilization. But the confession came 3 centuries too late. "Captain, what are your orders?" asked Minho as sensor readings showed the first Void Shepherd ships entering the system. "Do we withdraw to human space?" Taemin looked at the tactical display showing thousands of refugee ships filled with innocent civilians. The Andorian government had been arrogant and dismissive, but the people fleeing the system were just trying to survive. Children who had never insulted humans were about to be consumed by mechanical death? "No," he said quietly, "we are better than they are, and we prove it by being better than they are." He activated the ship's communication system and sent a message that would change the course of galactic history. "This is Captain Taemin of the Terran vessel Nu Seoul to all refugee ships. We are moving to defensive positions. Follow our lead and we will get you out of here alive." The response from the refugee fleet was immediate and emotional. Beings who had spent their lives dismissing human capabilities were now looking to human leadership for salvation. The Nu Seoul moved into formation with the evacuation fleet just as the first Void Shepherd ships appeared on the horizon. Back on Earth, the news of Taemin's decision sent shockwaves through the government. President Jin-ae convened an emergency session of the cabinet to decide how to respond to the captain's unauthorized action. "He has violated direct orders and endangered human lives," argued Defense Minister Hwon. "We should recall him immediately." "He has done what humans have always done," countered Foreign Minister Jin. "He has protected the innocent regardless of politics." The debate was interrupted by Admiral Dong Hyen, who entered the briefing room with urgent tactical reports. The situation in the Andorian system was developing rapidly, and the implications went far beyond one captain's decision. "Madam President, Captain, Taemin has engaged the Void Shepherds and his tactics are proving effective," he reported. "The Shepherds are responding to human warfare differently than they respond to alien tactics." The tactical feed from the Andorian system showed something that had never happened before. The Void Shepherds, ancient and powerful, were being outmaneuvered by human strategy. The mechanical beings had fought the same galactic species for millions of years, and they knew every alien tactic, every defensive formation, every desperate gambit, but humans were different. Captain Taman's fleet used strategies that made no sense to the logical minds of the Void Shepherds. They attacked from impossible angles, used deception and misdirection, and adapted their tactics faster than the ancient machines could compensate. Captain Dong Haiyan stood on the bridge of the battleship New Earth watching the final evacuation transports leave the Galactic Assembly Station. His crew worked quietly at their stations preparing for the journey home. After 30 years of service, in assembly space they were finally going back to human territory. "Sir, we are receiving urgent messages from across the galaxy," reported Lieutenant So Young from the communication station. Her face was pale as she read the incoming transmissions. "Assembly forces are requesting immediate assistance with station malfunctions," Dong Haiyan nodded grimly. It was starting already. The aliens were about to learn how much they had depended on human expertise for their daily operations. "Ignore all assembly requests," he ordered. "We are no longer their problem solvers across the galaxy's similar scenes. We're playing out." Human ships were powering down their communication arrays and severing all ties with alien vessels. Space stations that had relied on human engineers for maintenance were suddenly left without technical support. Trade routes that had been protected by human patrol ships were now empty and vulnerable. On the mining world of Kepler 442b engineer, Yujin was overseeing the shutdown of the massive fusion reactor that had powered 3 entire star systems. For over 200 years, the reactor was a marvel of human engineering, but the alien inhabitants had always assumed it was their own technology. They had never bothered to learn how it actually worked. "Ma'am, the crystalline hive mind is sending increasingly desperate messages," reported her assistant Jin-A as she monitored the communication channels. "They want to know why the power levels are dropping." Yujin smiled coldly as she initiated the final shutdown sequence. "Tell them to figure it out themselves," she said. "After all, we are just primitive humans who could not possibly understand such advanced technology." The reactor's massive fusion core began its controlled shutdown. Within hours, 3 star systems would be plunged into darkness. The aliens who had lived there for centuries would finally understand, who had really been keeping their lights on. Similar shutdowns were happening across the galaxy. The atmospheric processors on New Centauri stopped working when the human maintenance crews failed to report for their shifts. The quantum communication array that connected distant systems went offline as human technicians simply walked away from their posts. The interstellar navigation beacons that guided ships through hyperspace fell silent one by one. Prime Minister Kyung-soo sat in his office on Earth watching the reports flood in. The aliens were panicking as their supposedly advanced civilization began falling apart without human support. Trade networks were collapsing as navigation systems failed. Communication between different species was becoming impossible without human translators. "Sir, the avian hegemony is requesting an emergency meeting," reported his aide Hae-won. "They are offering significant concessions if we will return to the assembly." Kyung-soo laughed bitterly. 3 days ago they called us feathered worms who had no business flying in space, he said. "Now they want to negotiate. Tell them we are no longer interested in their opinion." The withdrawal was not just political, it was total and complete. Every human scientist stopped sharing research data with alien colleagues. Every human engineer abandoned the systems they had been maintaining. Every human peacekeeper left their posts in disputed territories. After 3 centuries of thankless service, humanity had simply vanished from galactic affairs. Dr. Min-ho, head of the Terran Science Consortium, was monitoring the chaos. From his laboratory on Mars, the reports coming in painted a picture of complete systemic failure. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations were discovering that their technology was useless without human expertise. "The Universal Translation Matrix is developing critical errors," reported his assistant Yoonji as she reviewed the incoming data. "Without human linguists, maintaining the system communication between species is becoming impossible." Min-ho nodded as he watched the display showing communication failures across the galaxy. The translation matrix was perhaps humanity's greatest gift to galactic civilization. It had taken human linguists over a century to develop and required constant maintenance to handle the complexities of alien languages. Without it, the different species could barely understand each other. Let them try to fix it themselves, Minho said. They always claimed human language skills were inferior to their advanced communication methods. The effects cascaded through every level of galactic society. The Galactic Assembly could no longer hold proper sessions because the delegates could not understand each other. Trade negotiations broke down when species could not communicate their needs. Even simple requests for help became impossible to convey. On the diplomatic front, the situation was equally chaotic. Ambassador Tewa's departure had left a massive gap in interspecies relations. For decades, he had served as the primary mediator in conflicts between different alien civilizations. His understanding of alien psychology and his reputation for fairness had made him the most trusted diplomat in the galaxy. Without human mediators, ancient feuds began resurging. The Reptilian Empire and the Aquatic Federation had been at peace for 2 centuries thanks to a treaty negotiated by human diplomats. Within a week of humanity's withdrawal, both sides were mobilizing their fleets for war. The ethereal, collective, and the crystalline hive mind had maintained an uneasy alliance. For over 1,000 years, human ambassadors had helped them resolve dozens of territorial disputes. Now, with no mediators available, their relationship was deteriorating rapidly. Captain Sang Woo of the Deep Space Monitoring Station, Alpha 7, watched the military buildups with professional interest. His station was positioned at the edge of human space where he could observe the growing chaos without being directly involved. "Sir, we are detecting massive fleet movements throughout the galaxy," reported his sensor officer Na Young. "It looks like at least 6 major conflicts are about to break out." Sang Woo studied the tactical display with grim satisfaction. "They always said human military doctrine was too aggressive," he said. "Now they get to see what real warfare looks like when humans are not there to keep the peace." The irony was not lost on him. For centuries, humans had been criticized for their supposedly violent nature. Alien species had claimed that humanity's warrior culture was primitive and barbaric. Yet it was human peacekeepers who had prevented galactic wars and human diplomats who had maintained stability. President Jinne addressed the human people from her office in the underground city of New Seoul. The evacuation of human personnel from assembly space was nearly complete. Over 10 million humans were returning home after centuries of service to ungrateful aliens. "My fellow humans," she began, her speech being broadcast to every human world, "today we have taken the first step toward true independence. We have shown the galaxy that we will no longer accept second-class treatment." The response from human worlds was overwhelmingly positive. Families welcomed home loved ones who had spent their lives serving alien masters. Workers who had maintained alien infrastructure returned to build human cities. Soldiers who had fought alien wars came home to protect human interests. "We have given them 300 years of our best efforts," Jinne continued. "We have shared our knowledge, protected their worlds, and asked for nothing but respect in return. They have shown us that such respect will never be freely given." The broadcast ended with images of human ships returning to Earth orbit. The great evacuation was complete. Humanity had successfully extracted itself from galactic civilization, and the aliens were finally beginning to understand what they had lost. In the depths of space, automated systems continued their work for a few more days, then one by one they began to fail. The galaxy that had dismissed humanity as primitive was about to learn the true meaning of technological collapse. Admiral Sang-woo stood in the observation deck of the Deep Space Monitoring Station Genesis, watching the stars with growing unease. 3 months had passed since humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Assembly, and the reports coming in were worse than anyone had imagined. But now something far more dangerous was stirring in the darkness between the stars. "Sir, we are detecting massive energy signatures in the void sectors," reported Lieutenant Na Young from the sensor station. "The readings match the theoretical profiles for Void Shepherd technology." Sang-woo felt his blood run cold. The Void Shepherds were an ancient mechanical race that had terrorized the galaxy millions of years ago. They had been dormant for so long that most species considered them a myth. Only humans had taken the threat seriously. "Activate the quantum inhibitor network," he ordered. "We need to keep them sleeping until we can." "Sir," Na Young interrupted, "the inhibitor network is offline. The quantum resonance generators have been failing since the human technicians were withdrawn." The magnitude of the disaster hit Sang-Woo like a physical blow. For 2 centuries, human scientists had maintained a network of quantum inhibitors designed to keep the Void Shepherds dormant. The alien species had dismissed it as human paranoia and refused to provide funding or support. Now their arrogance was about to cost them everything. "How many inhibitors are still functional?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Approximately 30% and falling," Na Young reported. "At current failure rates, the entire network will be down within 2 weeks. Sang-Woo activated the emergency communication system and began broadcasting warnings to every human outpost in the galaxy. The Void Shepherds were awakening, and without the inhibitor network there would be nothing to stop them from resuming their ancient campaign of destruction. On Earth, President Jinneh received the emergency transmission in her secure command bunker. The situation had escalated beyond political maneuvering into an existential threat to all organic life in the galaxy. The aliens who had dismissed human warnings were about to face an enemy they could not comprehend. "Madam President, we are receiving desperate pleas from every major alien government," reported Defense Minister Haewon. "They are offering complete surrender of authority if we will help them fight the Void Shepherds." Jinneh studied the tactical displays showing Void Shepherd movements throughout the galaxy. The mechanical beings were emerging from their slumber in the dark spaces between stars. Their massive ships, each the size of a small moon, were beginning to move toward inhabited systems. "What do our military analysts say about their capabilities?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be grim. "The Void Shepherds possess technology that predates most galactic civilizations," reported Admiral Donghyun from the military briefing room. "Their ships can manipulate matter at the molecular level, and their weapons can destroy entire star systems." The first attacks came without warning. The outer rim colonies of the Reptilian Empire simply vanished from sensor readings. No distress signals, no debris, no evidence that millions of beings had ever existed. The Void Shepherds had returned, and they were picking up exactly where they had left off. Containment of the exploration vessel knew. Sol was monitoring the situation from neutral space when he received a desperate transmission from the Andorian system. The aquatic civilization that had once mocked human naval tactics was now begging for protection from an enemy they could not fight. "Captain, we are receiving a direct plea from the Andorian High Council," reported his communication officer Yu Jin. "They are requesting immediate evacuation assistance for their civilian population." Taemin watched the tactical display as Void Shepherd ships approached the water world. The ancient mechanical beings showed no interest in conquest or negotiation. They simply consumed everything in their path, converting matter into energy to fuel their endless expansion. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked his first officer Minho. "Do we abandon them to their fate?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. The Andorians had spent decades belittling human achievements and dismissing human concerns. They had called humans primitive mammals who had no business in the depths of space. Now they were facing extinction, and only human ships were close enough to help. Across the galaxy, similar scenarios were playing out as the Void Shepherds swept through system after system. The proud avian hegemony watched helplessly as their golden cities were consumed by mechanical swarms. The crystalline hive mind found that their advanced collective intelligence was useless against an enemy that operated on purely logical principles. Dr. Wu Jin of the Terran Research Institute studied the Void Shepherd attack patterns from his laboratory on Mars. The mechanical beings were following strategies that had proven effective millions of years ago. They had fought the same galactic species for so long that they knew every weakness, every defensive tactic, every desperate last resort. The aliens are trying to use the same military doctrines that failed against the Shepherds in the past. He reported to his research team, "They have learned nothing from history and they are paying the price." The Galactic Assembly had been forced to abandon their ancient meeting world when Void Shepherds consumed the entire star system. The surviving delegates were scattered across refugee stations trying to coordinate a defense with broken communication systems and failing technology. Chancellor Karyan of the Zephyrian Dominion sent increasingly desperate messages to human space. His species had ruled the galaxy for 2 millennia, but they were helpless against an enemy that viewed organic life as nothing more than raw materials to be processed. "We offer complete submission to human authority," his final message read. "We recognize that we have been wrong about your species and we beg for your forgiveness and assistance." Similar messages flooded in from across the galaxy. The Ethereal Collective offered to share their most sacred technologies. The Aquatic Federation promised to surrender their entire military fleet to human command. The Reptilian Empire offered to become a human protectorate, but the offers were coming too late. The Void Shepherds were not interested in negotiation or conquest. They were a force of nature that consumed everything in their path. The galaxy that had dismissed human warnings was now facing the consequences of their arrogance. General Haywan studied the tactical situation from her command center on Luna. The Void Shepherds were advancing on multiple fronts using strategies that no organic intelligence had ever countered successfully. The alien military forces were being systematically destroyed despite their supposedly advanced technology. "Ma'am, the refugee fleets are reporting massive casualties," reported her aide B.O. Young. "Entire species are abandoning their homeworlds, but the Shepherds are faster than conventional ships." Hey, one watched the displays showing the growing exodus of alien refugees. Billions of beings were fleeing their homes in a desperate attempt to escape the mechanical death that was spreading across the galaxy. But there was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. "What about the human colonies in the affected sectors?" she asked. "Are they evacuating as well?" "No, ma'am," Bo Young replied. "The human settlements are maintaining their positions. They are requesting permission to activate the emergency defense protocols." Haywan smiled grimly. The human colonies had been preparing for this day for decades. While the aliens had dismissed the Void Shepherd threat as mythology, humans had been developing weapons and strategies specifically designed to fight the mechanical menace. The galaxy was about to learn that there was one species that had never stopped preparing for this ancient enemy. The question was whether humanity would choose to save the beings who had spent centuries treating them as inferior. The decision would determine not just the fate of the galaxy, but the kind of species humanity would become. In the depths of space, the Void Shepherds continued their relentless advance. But for the first time in millions of years, they were about to encounter an enemy that had been waiting for them. The real war was about to begin.